All right. Well, welcome all. Sorry we have to meet like this, but here at the Property Appraiser's Office, I'm Mike Twitty, your Pinellas County Property Appraiser. Hopefully you've been in contact with our office since the storm has happened, or the storms, plural, and we've been able to give you some guidance. Again, we're not the building department. We're in our specific lane within our office, but we've been trying to be helpful, and we've been a resource to the various building departments around the county in several capacities. So we're going to talk about some of those things today. I want to make sure you understand there's a lot of confusion, a lot of misinformation that's been floating around as well. We'll try to clarify some of that. People tend to want to get their insurance lane confused with their valuation and repair lane, and you want to keep those separate. You don't want to start crossing up your insurance claim with your valuation on your property. They're different. Working with your adjuster versus working with your appraiser, and those are two different things. So if you start to overlap those, it can start to get really confusing and dangerous sometimes. So, but I want to start off by saying we do these public education sessions here each month. They always have a different flavor based on time of year. Obviously, these are special circumstances with these after the storm answers sessions. This is our second one we've done on this, but we've been out and about talking to lots of neighborhood associations, working with the various cities. I've been on the beaches many times, talking to civic organizations and other groups that are trying to recover since the storm. So we've got a special guest with us today too. We've got Lisa Foster, who's the Pinellas County Floodplain Administrator. So she has a big role in what happens from the unincorporated county's perspective. So she can shed some light, because she does interact with the different city floodplain administrators and the building departments as well. So we'll let her talk more on the substantial damage issue and hopefully shed a little light there when we get there. Back to the public ed, you can see on this slide here, we've got several sessions. This is just a sample of some of the things we cover, and at the end we'll let you know what we're going to do next month. It'll be all about homestead and personal exemptions. So if anybody needs an exemptions checkup or has a new filing, because the filing deadline is March 1, we want to make sure everybody is up to speed for their 2025 ad valorem potential exemptions. All right, come on. All right. So to kind of set the table a little bit, we probably had in the neighborhood of 30,000 homes, unfortunately, get water in them via Helene and Milton, particularly, mostly in Helene. Milton was really more of the wind event. These stats here on those top two rows, that's really from the initial damage assessments that occurred. That was the windshield look at the very high level when teams just went out in the field right after the storm and started having to tag things as destroyed, major, minor, or affected, and put them into different buckets. That helped set the stage for what needed to be looked at for substantial damage after that. So this was the first high pass. This little section here in orange underneath is just showing some stats related to unincorporated county, just to give you a little snapshot. They've sent out over 3,000 letters so far, and that's within that group of mostly major and minor that were tagged as could potentially have substantial damage issues. Those people will get a letter, one of two flavors. Either you're substantially damaged, we've initially determined that you're substantially damaged, or we've determined you're not substantially damaged. So there's two different ones, but everybody does not get a letter. So some people that are sitting around waiting for a letter, you're not necessarily going to get a letter unless you're in that initial universe of things that were generally tagged as major or minor. Does that make sense? All right, on our website, lots of resources, lots of ways to get to those that are storm damage related. Obviously here on the left is a shot of our homepage. You can go right through that storm damage information button. That'll take you into all of our FAQs, and then there's links into the various things you can do related to our office, such as the partial tax refund, that process. We're going to talk about all these things, the building value reconsideration, and just a lot of other answers to frequently asked questions are covered in there. So a couple different ways to get at those. It's just a snapshot of our FAQ page. So the Department of Revenue's 465 form, that is the partial property tax refund form. I want to alert people, if you haven't done one yet and you are displaced for 30 days or more, and I suspect everybody here was, and that is listening, when you hit our page for this, you can see we've already broken down the 3 storms of 2024. And if you were displaced through the end of the year, we've given you the calculation on the number of days that you need to put on the form for the days displaced. It's something different than one of those. If you've been able to repair and get back in before year end, then just please put that number on there. There's information there on what documentation to just help us support the fact that you were displaced. Even though the Department of Revenue doesn't ask for photos on these, we consider the photos post-storm to really be the most helpful to let us know, because then we can see the extent of the damage, we know how heavy a lift it is to fix some of those things and get back into property. And then obviously we know the delays in actually getting permits. So even if it looks like you could have repaired within a 30-day window, you may not have been able to because of the challenges in getting permits. And to let people know, so the tax rebate is only for residential properties. Doesn't matter if it's homestead or not, it's just residential, and Department of Revenue considers residential any parcel with up to 9 units. So they can be small multifamily properties as well. So substantial damage, 50% rule. You probably learned more about this than you ever cared to, and have certainly heard more of those words uttered. You've got, I don't know if you've heard of the 49% rule. So we've got jurisdictions, unincorporated county, and several of our cities have subscribed to the 49% rule to get some additional community rating systems discounts for National Flood Insurance Program insurance. So that's why in some areas you'll see 49% instead of 50. Our letters, our FEMA letters have been updated to where if you pull those off our website, we know what jurisdiction it is. So we do the math based on the 49 or the 50% for you, so you can see the max repair number there on our letters. But I want to bring Lisa Foster up to talk a little bit about the substantial damage process. She can certainly enlighten us on how this works and how the county, at least from the unincorporated county's perspective, is walking through that process.
Sure. Thank you, Mike.
Sure. Here, I'll just slide over here.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're only going to be amplified online.
Okay, got it. Good afternoon, everybody.
Is it going? Okay.
Good. Okay.
Yeah. So, so I know there's a lot of confusion about the substantial damage process.
You want to do this?
People are. How's the camera? Do you need me to stand over here? Am I better over here? Let's do that.
Okay.
So there's a lot of people that are wondering, there was initial information that came out, messaging from the county in particular, that said if your water level's below your outlets, just go ahead and apply for a permit. Don't wait for a letter, just get moving. Now, I'm speaking for unincorporated county. The cities all were slightly different on some of their messaging, but that was a general rule of thumb. But then we had a bunch of people that they didn't necessarily get that messaging, or they missed that message. So then maybe they didn't have a foot of water. They had 5-6 inches, but now they're stuck because now they've gotten a letter and now they're rolled up in the reassessment process. Can you talk a little bit about how somebody goes through that reassessment process and how how it really is similar to applying for a permit anyway. So a lot of it sounds like a big lift, but a lot of that you have to do anyway.
We shouldn't have very many that had less than a foot of water and received a letter stating that they were substantially damaged. That doesn't sound quite right. If that occurred, that's going to be few and far between. So if you didn't have water over your electrical outlets, by all means, please do come in and apply for your permit. For folks that were flagged as needing an assessment, like Mike mentioned, we did an initial brush of damage assessment. We identified properties that we needed to take a look at. Keep in mind, this is not, the county trying to be mean or anything. This is us trying to stay compliant with NFIP. We have almost 19,000 policies in unincorporated Pinellas County with about $8 billion in coverage. So it's incredibly important that we stay compliant with this program so that folks maintain their mortgages, maintain their insurance, especially with citizens now requiring flood insurance, even if you're not in one of those FEMA designated floodplains. So it's critical that we have the documentation we need for future audits with FEMA for compliance with the program. So that's sort of the premise of this. The premise is to maintain compliance. So the initial batch of homes that we identified as needing to be inspected for potential substantial damage and be assessed was based on the depth of water, because we have high water mark data, finished floor elevations and things like that, and the damage assessment, the initial windshield assessment that Mike talked about. So we have this batch of properties that we're looking at. We did initial assessments. At no point was anybody not allowed to come in for a permit, though. So everybody was welcome to come in and apply for a permit. If that water was over the 12 inches, though, they would get pushed to a detailed substantial damage assessment, meaning we'll take a detailed look at your cost of repairs. And if you have everything on that cost of repairs to fix it back to how it was prior to the storm, then you can move forward with your permitting. So that was the detailed process for people that came in for a permit, applied for a permit application. Separate and apart from that, so it's two things happening at once. Separate and apart from that, we got support from the state, and they went out and they did their initial assessments. They went out, they took photos of houses, and they did their initial, we use depth damage curves. If you have this much water, there's approximately this much % damage on these different elements of the structure. So it's an estimate. So that first brush, it's just an estimate, and that's what those letters are based on. If you disagree with the result on your letter, whether it be substantial damage and you think it's not, or whether it's not substantially damaged and you think it is, which we have many of those, because we have increased cost of compliance insurance coverage, and there are grants, which you rank higher for if you are substantially damaged. So this goes both ways. If you disagree with whichever result is on the letter, then we've advised that you apply for a reassessment. And what that reassessment is basically the same exact thing as those folks that came in for a permit, and we bumped it over to a detailed assessment. So we're looking at the value that Mike's office has come up with for the structure, not the whole property, just the building, compared to the cost to repair it. We're looking at pictures of what it looked like before, because whatever's on that cost breakdown has to fix it back to what it looked like before. Did I answer your question in a really long-winded manner?
Yes, yeah, that was good. That was good.
That's only for the county, right?
So this was unincorporated. We put in a mission request along with several municipalities. It was basically all the Barrier Island communities, Oldsmar, Safety Harbor, and Gulfport. I think those are the only non-Barrier Island communities, unincorporated, to get help with these initial assessments. So they were all on that same kind of work order with the state to go out and do this first brush. But essentially how that works out is each community, each city or unincorporated county has essentially hired this company to come in and help. Now, we were able to provide a lot of support. We provided tablets for them to do the inspections. They're housed at our EOC right now so that they have a place to work. We've provided them with a lot of technical support, soft phones so that they can contact residents, things like that. So the county has provided a ton of support, but essentially each city has hired that company to do that task.
I don't know if you know the answer to this question, but what if during the demo of a property, it turns out that there was damage that you couldn't see, like for instance termites that may have eaten out a beam, but it's been replaced and fixed long before the current owner ever was in there or knew about it and wasn't aware about it because it was all covered up. Can that be fixed outside of, okay, sorry. Can that damage that was previous to the storm, older, unknown of, can that be fixed without getting?
The short answer is no. No, the short answer is no. So everything in the floodplain must be permitted. All development in the floodplain needs to be permitted. So if that happens, so the question is basically, here's my cost estimate of the repairs, but we opened up the wall, we found a whole lot more damage. So now you're going to need to add on to that permit. So essentially at this point, you've passed that substantial damage test. We've said, okay, the cost to fix everything that got damaged is under that threshold, 49 or 50%, whichever city you're in. So you've passed that substantial damage assessment. Now you're in permitting. But in permitting, even though you've passed substantial damage, we're still going to go through a substantial improvement review, which is similar but different to the substantial damage. So substantial improvement takes all the costs of everything you're going to do to the building, regardless of whether it's repairs or improvements or upgrades. Say you had carpeting and you're going to put in hardwood floors, and you had laminate and you're going to put in granite. That's going to be the cost estimate you put in for your permit, because that's actually what you're doing. So the damage that gets found will get lumped into that substantial improvement. If that puts you over the threshold, and you don't have any additions, so that damage plus the damage from the storm combined exceeds the threshold, then it is substantial damage. If you can add that in and it doesn't exceed that threshold, and you're still under your substantial improvement threshold as well, then you can proceed with permitting. But it still needs to combined be under that threshold.
It has to be done with the other.
Correct. It all has to be on one permit, right? You'd have to do, I forget what it's called, it's not an amendment, but you'd have to basically edit that permit to add in the additional items. And keep in mind, I do not work in the building department, I work in public works. I know enough about the building permitting process to be dangerous.
Yeah, and I'm glad that question came up, because I've heard a lot of people say, well, while I'm at it, I'm going to do a few extra things. Mm-hmm. They need to be very careful in doing that, because they may run into a situation like that.
Right.
So they may only be at 30%, okay? But then they say, oh, I've got 20% to work with, so I'm going to do these extra things and do it all at the same time. But then they may bump into, they open up walls, they run into other things that are going to drive them further along. So I would advise, my advice would be, don't do a bunch of extra bells and whistles at this point. Just get yourself whole, mm-hmm. get repaired, and then if you've got to look back or whatever you've got within your jurisdiction to deal with, let that time go by and then do those extra things that you want to do. So you don't get yourself right up against that wall to where you may be in jeopardy.
We have two questions, one there and one there.
Can you run them a mic? I just want to make sure people online can hear.
What if you decide to raise your building? Does that still apply?
So if you raise your building to make it compliant with current codes, then you're no longer subject to, I mean, the building may have been substantially damaged or not, and you choose to elevate the building. As long as you elevate it to current codes, you'll be fine. You can do what you want with it.
So you can go ahead with your permitting process through your contractor and.
Absolutely. So if you're
stuck with the 50% or the 49%.
Once the building is fully compliant, then, so technically no, but technically yes. So it's kind of a tricky answer. So you're in the floodplain, so we do have to look at it for substantial improvement, but because you're compliant at that point, it's not going to be it will be substantial improvement, but you don't have to do anything because you're already compliant, essentially. So you can do more than the threshold at that point, because you're going to spend 100%, but you're already up out of the floodplain and you're compliant with all your, your foundation requirements and everything else. You can basically have no cap on what you're going to spend on it.
We'll do a couple more here and then we'll move on to patient.
Just tag on to her question. How do we apply in the city of Tarpon Springs for any kind of federal grants to raise, especially a historic building?
So I think I can slide on that a little bit.
We're going to get into the
later.
grants and
we can
later
touch
in the
on that a little bit
presentation.
later.
Great, we're going to bring Lisa back for that. All right, we have one over here. Rachel. And Rachel is one of ours. Resident. So she was substantially, unfortunately, in the storm.
I didn't receive letters in the past hurricanes regarding substantial damage or permitting. And what's the difference between past hurricanes and this hurricane to receive the letters now and not before?
So the process is always the same. And if we found that there were buildings that needed to be inspected, and we had in unincorporated, I believe we did about 200 inspections after Idalia. So there were just fewer structures that we thought may have sustained substantial damage with past storms because they hadn't been as bad. So it's the same exact process. There's just a whole lot more buildings impacted from this particular storm. So there were a whole lot more inspections.
Yeah, the scope and scale of this
Right.
was unprecedented. You know, our county's never experienced this volume of impacted properties before.
No, I want to say there was like 30,000 buildings flagged for an assessment with this particular, with the back-to-back storms combined.
Right.
So then, understanding is what, so based on your response, then any hurricane you have when you get damage, you're always supposed to get permitting to do drywall or whatever.
Absolutely. Everything in a floodplain needs to be permitted, and everything in a floodplain also has to be reviewed for substantial improvement. And Mike alluded to the look-back period. Different jurisdictions have different look-back periods. The purpose of those look-back periods is to prevent phasing of projects so that we don't have people, you know, building more and more and more on the ground, which of course contributes to the insurance payouts. And you know, that's not going to keep insurance rates low here with more insurance payouts. And it's also putting more things at risk for flooding that will end up as debris. So, you know, how difficult it was to pick up all the debris after the hurricane. So there are a lot of reasons we're trying to get folks up off the ground, and this is an NFIP requirement, and phasing's not permitted, and that's one of the reasons. Quicker recovery if we get folks off the ground and we don't keep adding on it and putting more expensive things at risk to flooding.
I know you want to answer after, but the electrical this round, they said anything underwater had to be replaced. Just so you know that it's there's a lot of pushback from the insurance companies to replace that because they're thinking that you're upgrading your house, and I even send them the codes from the building department showing them that it's a FEMA requirement, and I have an FIP, so I don't understand, but my insurance company, I'm still going back and forth to get because they're not recognizing that as something that's required to be replaced and not something I desire to be replaced.
So bring that to the insurance folks. We have volunteer insurance agents that work on it. We have a program for public information through the floodplain program, which we come up with messaging and outreach to just try to get information out to folks about insurance. So we use them, we tap into them as the technical experts to do that. So I will reach out to them and ask them that question. You can also do the same. Their contact information is on our website on the flooding page, and I'm sure Mike can get that link to you. Mm-hmm. There are disconnects between the building side and the insurance side. And Mike alluded to, you know, your insurance thing, that's separate and apart from your permitting piece of it. Now, if you've got the adjuster's information and you want to use that to help support your detailed substantial damage assessment, you can submit it, but we're not going to weigh our decision solely on that information, and you don't have to submit it.
Right. Well, and a lot of times they're pushing the envelope. They're trying to push that number up higher.
Right.
As opposed to your contractor's number. So that's where you want to be careful.
Lisa, homes affected by this rule, where they are considered mobile vehicles.
They are technically on the floodplain residents, like for homes. Substantial improvement, substantial damage requirements do apply to them as well. RVs, so if you have an ready located in the same location for more than 180 days, it does not apply to those. But any permanent structure for residents is
subject to the same rules.
So I'm in Gulfport, non-substantial damage, and I listened to Dave Connor suggest that if you had less than 12 inches of water, you could get a permit that day. Gulfport doesn't see it that way, apparently. So how does I understand that's unincorporated. How does Gulfport provide that? I had about 6 inches of water, no electrical damage.
Each city has a building department, so each city has their own building official and floodplain administrator. So each jurisdiction sets up how they're going to process, this. So the county is following their substantial damage management plan, which is part of our CEMP, our comprehensive emergency management plan. So, we're following our guidelines, and, cities are welcome to use what we're doing on the suit. In a lot of cases, the cities don't have the resources the county does. They've got, 2 folks working in the office or a very light building staff. So we even had to reach out and get assistance. So we submitted mission requests to the state. The state has provided us a lot of teams. We have one team that's working with us plus other municipalities for those assessments. And then separate, we have another team who's helping us with the detailed substantial damage assessments. And that team has property appraisers reviewing private appraisals. It has folks with expertise in construction reviewing the cost estimates. And we have additional floodplain managers like myself that are reviewing the whole package to make those determinations. Then it goes to the city, and the city or it would be my building official sign off on it after. And then we have other teams that are helping us with Blue Sky with regular permitting. So we have a lot of teams that we've requested that are helping us because the base jurisdiction. So depends on the jurisdiction and how much help they've been able to get remission requests and things like that.
But at the end of the day, they still have to make their own policy calls within their jurisdictions.
I'd like to know how we bought 08, 9, something like that. Another gentleman not that far from me bought in like 17, 18. He's a 2-1, we're 2-2. We have hurricane windows. We have the 4-point wind mitigation thing on the roof. Its value, this stone, this one came much higher than ours.
So that's your BVR. So I'm going to pass that back to Mike.
Yep, that's fine. Yeah, so that's,
And the square footage, he's 800, we're like 1150.
Okay.
And we came much slower than.
right. It sounds you likely have more depreciation on your structure than he may have. And I'm gonna talk about that in a minute about why you might see differences in values and how our values different from a private appraisal, because there's some different methodologies going on. But generally, if it's a long-time homeowner, a lot of times some permits may not have been pulled. We don't see the inside of houses, but on something that's sold in the last few years, we do typically see photographs through MLS and things like that, so we're able to make a more accurate call on the condition, quality of that home. So if somebody's been a long time homeowner, and especially if we didn't see permit activity or things that would justify us moving that effective age upwards, or I'm sorry, downwards to move the value upward, then that's where you can get some of those differences.
I got into for windows and doors and the 4-point thing. That was like in 12 or 13, I believe. So it was a county program. And so you've seen the inside of.
Well, no, the county program, that could have been the building department looking at it. That's not us. So the property appraiser's office likely has never been inside of your house. So we're completely independent from the building department.
Was permit, and so they should see that there was value added to the home. Plus, we also added a large screened-in porch. That all permitted.
We'd have
City of Gulf.
a specific example. We're happy to do that afterwards if you want to. I'll pull up your address. We can look at it. Okay.
It's like $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 more than what you guys are appraising at.
I'm not surprised. And I'm going to talk about a process that we've instituted to help correct some of those things where we can get that better window into what the structure value might need to be to. So let me jump. Good.
Also, I had gotten appraisals for repairs and everything because we had gotten this substantial damage letter. You guys gave us like 53,000. I was at like about 45, 48,000.
Okay.
So, but we still,
Right.
live in
Still
Gulfport,
under
it's-
yeah.
yeah.
Well, that's good.
And why do you require, from my understanding, we're supposed to pay ourselves if we ripped out the drywall. And if we do, we have to add in our time that we put into the house, that we've done personally. There's church groups that have offered there's, we have friends that are willing to come down and help us at no charge. They pay their own expenses coming down.
But FEMA requires there to be a labor component factored in. It doesn't have to be super high, doesn't have to be, can't be super low. It's supposed to be representative of a market amount, because that would be factored in normal replacement cost calculations.
So why can't I just pay myself and so?
They have a minimum that they allow.
There are minimums. So there's a book called RS Means, and okay,
Oh,
got it. Is this better?
got it.
So there's a book called RS Means, which has the average labor costs and things. So we're using the adjusted to St. Petersburg values in there to check these cost estimates that are coming in. You can use those numbers, or you could call your building department and ask them what the numbers probably should be.
I've asked 3 different people, golf board, this information, and what do I get? The runner.
We'll get that information for you.
Okay. So we've already talked about FEMA letter. Most of you all have seen that, but we've started. We didn't have them for condominiums before because we don't do cost approaches at the property appraiser's office on condos, and FEMA requires it to be the entire building because they look at each structure independent, and of course we're valuing units. So for tax assessment purposes, we're looking at individual condominium units, what the market value is. That's what an assessment's based on. So we had not historically rolled up values to one common structure, because then it requires you got to allocate out the land, you got to take out any extra features that boat slips and other things as part of your common elements that might not be part of that building. So it was a pretty heavy lift to do that, and it's not part of our normal statutory duties. But we went ahead and took that on. It was over 100,000 condo units that we've had to work on. So we've been working on that over the last month. So all the condo FEMA letters are out there now, and what it does is if you click on a specific condo unit, because I think we had some folks here that were in a condominium on a first level, they obviously got hit really hard. So you can go on there and pull up your unit, and what it'll do is it'll give you the value for your entire structure. It'll give you a depreciated value of your structure. It's not your unit, it's just that entire building. So that's real important for you working with your association. Saves a lot of people from having to go outside, have their association contract with a fee appraiser to do an actual cash value appraisal.
Mike, you have a question over here?
Do you know if those are out yet for condominiums?
They are. I think that use code is out there as well. We are having to relook at some of we have some uniqueness with some of like the beach cottages and things like that are a little problematic. So we're revisiting some of those valuations. But I would just go on and click on your parcel, and if you see a letter with the numbers in there, then we've done them. So.
And if there is, about how long it'll be before they come out?
See exactly what that use code is that
Tony
we're talking
said
about.
probably by the end of the day.
Huh?
Tony says probably by the end of the day.
Okay. All right. So another process we started doing, because we ran into an issue with especially people that were damaged from Idalia the year before. So when they hit January 1 of 2024, they had already opened up their walls. They had had flooding and had to deal with that. Well, their improvements, we're always valuing in our office as of an effective date of January 1. That's our snapshot in time. So we wrote down those improvements. Well, but then it hurt them on their FEMA letter. So they worked through 2024, fixed their house. Now it's shiny and new right before Helene rolls in. And now they get totally wiped out. So, and then they go to our FEMA letter and it says, I've got 30 grand. my structure, something like that. Just make an example, but we ran into those. I started looking at it, I said, you know, it's a shame because we always have, you know, our statutory duty, we always have to deliver our numbers on January 1. That's our effective date. So I said, was there a process we could do to try and help people? Because I was worried about, I knew we didn't have enough of private practitioners in the appraisal field in our market area to serve the need to do actual cash values for everybody. And obviously they cost money. And I was worried about big time, you know, backups for our citizens. And so we came up with a process called a building value reconsideration. So what we're doing is if people submit evidence, some pre-storm photos so we can see what the condition, quality of the inside was like, particularly for longtime homeowners or ones that might have had some, you know, done a bunch of renovation. Maybe it didn't require a permit, but they've really updated the inside of that home. We can do a relook there. We have our directors meeting multiple times a week, doing reviews on these, and they've been able to, on better than 90% of those, have some upward movement. And then we issue a new letter, so it replaces the FEMA letter that's on our website, and it's a new building value reconsideration letter. It goes right at the structure, and we're able to put that on there. Now, if they're a homesteader, it's not going to affect their taxes because they're under the Save Our Homes cap, as long as they didn't create new space, you know, they didn't turn their garage into new living area, things like that, where they literally changed a sub area, then yes, that's going to catch up to them in future years, but nothing's going to touch them in 24. But if you're a homesteader and you just, you know, refreshed inside, did some things, that's fine. That's not gonna harm you. So I want to encourage people, if they need that little bit of extra, if they're close, they're worried about their contractor's numbers and the 50% threshold, do the BVR process. They can make that application right through our website. Doesn't take long. Like I said, it's mostly driven by photographs. That's our big thing that we need. So you really need to give us some good information there, and then our teams will review those. So that's an alternative to going to getting an outside appraisal. So let's talk about private appraisals for a minute. If you are engaging somebody, if you need some big value movement, you know, that's going to be the way you're going to want to go, because they can use a different type of appraisal technique. They're only focused on a cost approach of the structure. So they're doing a replacement cost new, less depreciation. Their depreciation doesn't have to include functional obsolescence within the marketplace. So they're able to only hit it for physical deterioration. So that's a softer version of depreciation. So it doesn't take away as much from the replacement cost new. So that is, you know, one reason why you might want to go that route. But when you're interviewing your appraiser, make sure they've done these before. Hopefully they've done them in your jurisdiction, because they've got to be reviewed by the building official or floodplain administrator in those jurisdictions. A lot of them have their own checklists of what they require. So it's very helpful for those appraisers to, you know, ask them if they've got, you know, the checklist for your jurisdiction. Pinellas County has one. A lot of the cities are using the counties, but several of the cities have created their own as well. So very important they follow that. And then there are things that they are bumping into, and Lisa, we should probably talk about this, is, you know, what are the common things that appraisers are running into, what that could potentially, you know, essentially fail them on approval on an appraisal report. So depreciation is the biggie, it seems like, that we're running into, is the handling of the depreciation. Some of that has been some of the jurisdictions have had a strict interpretation of there's only one way you can do depreciation. A lot of the jurisdictions have started to soften on that, because as long as you approach it the right way, the appraiser needs to approach it the right way and be well supported, then you can actually do two different methods, either or. In some cases, I've seen appraisals where they've done both and supported it from both directions using multiple techniques. So the biggie is it needs to be well thought out, well supported, and appropriate. And the county's doing a good job now with improving the communication between the appraisal experts and the appraisal reviewers. because that was a sticking point there where an appraiser would submit an appraisal, they'd look up in the portal, the property owner would, and it would say, the appraisal was deficient, and with no real explanation. And then the appraiser saying, well, where's it deficient? What do I need to do? And they couldn't get any communication back on how to fix that, move forward. So my understanding is that has been improved. So hopefully that will be the case through some of the cities too. But we in our world as the property appraisers, we're not allowed to review those appraisals. So do not send your ACV appraisals to us for review. They're not for us to review. We'd actually be in a conflict there because we're already determining a value, and then you want us to review somebody else's value. That doesn't bode well. So we have to stay out of that lane. However, we can talk about appraisal theory. We can help, educate the building and floodplain administrators on proper appraisal theory. We've done that in several cases and explained how, yes, you can arrive at the same point by using two different methodologies. So I just wanted to point that out because I know we've got some appraisers and we've got building officials online as well. I think we had a question back here.
Did I hold the thing? Okay. So if our property is not substantially damaged, but we would like to do substantial improvements, would we just have to get contractor estimates to show that, like I would want the house to qualify as substantially damaged. So do I need to apply for a reassessment? Do I need to do a whole appraisal? I'm not trying to change value of the house. I'm saying that the cost to repair it is higher than what the 50% is.
So you actually want to be substantially damaged. So in.
Yeah. We have a lot.
Yes, I know. Well, in that case, you've got to justify that the costs, that the damages and the cost to repair those damages are more than your jurisdiction thinks they should be. So that is done, with a mix of your valuation, if you're using our FEMA letter compared with your contractor costs, and you have to work through that process with your building department.
So that would be like a reassessment of
submit the same way. Okay. Yep.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
If you cannot repair your home, if it was not damaged, you cannot repair your home under the 50% rule, then at that point, you become substantially damaged. Is that true? If you can't repair it, it's a rule.
But it is substantially damaged.
That it is substantially damaged, yes.
And that's a lot of people are having a problem with that couple of dollars over.
Well, yeah, if you're trying to save your home and you're really close, then you're going to want to do one of these revaluation processes. You either want to do our BVR, as we call it, the building value reconsideration process, or get an outside appraisal. If you're truly trying to save that structure.
About repairing the home, I got confused. So is the question based on if it's 50% or more, then you cannot repair your home?
Right. If you hit the 50% or more threshold, then you're substantially damaged technically.
And you cannot repair it.
Well, it's not a line in the sand. That's that letter is that first high pass. Then you have the reassessment process. So
that's why this reconsideration or the appraisal, if you're above that 50% and you want to repair it and all that.
You're doing more of a detailed look. That first was a high pass, trying to cover a lot of ground. Now we're getting down to brass tacks. We're going to get very, very detailed, detailed line item costs coupled with a more focused appraisal. So it's really those two things together.
Thank you.
Got Rachel, one.
Oh, the gentleman too.
After you know that you have a house that cannot be fixed due that is substantially damaged, and you already have done the appraisal, there is no someone that you can just go and talk to, since it's a portal that you use to try to obtain the permit. The experience that I'm having, they reply back to asking you for pictures that works as the inspection, after that, we receive a letter saying your house has been substantially damaged and you have to bring it up to code, rather elevating that house or bring it or building a brand new home. At that point, where do you submit the appraisal, or how do you build to the same portal? Or
So you've already gone through the reassessment process?
yeah, I mean, I'm trying to obtain the permit to renovate a house, but they are replying back to multiple homes the same letter that they are substantially damaged, and we have the appraisals done, and I try to upload those appraisals to the portal along with those pictures. But I'm under the impression that those are being like not considered at the time that they are being reviewed, or probably I'm not doing it in the correct way. So I was trying to obtain some clarifications. Madeira Beach, Barrington Beach, Barrington Shores.
Any advice there, Lisa?
So I would call the building departments for each one of those and just ask them what their reassessment process is. For unincorporated, we have an online portal where you upload all that documentation, it gets put into that record, and then we have that team that we got from the state that's doing that review on them. There has been a little miscommunication. People will upload documents and we don't know. So you might need to send an email or make a phone call and say, hey, I uploaded these documents to support my case on whenever you did, and ask them to take another look at it.
Yeah. We obtained some phone number that you can actually text back and forth, which has been very helpful. But the interaction is with the portal. It's not like send me a text. It just shows you what you need to do. Like upload pictures of the damage. That way it's inspection. At that point, I see like where I should be the break.
So I can't speak on behalf of the cities, but I would recommend that you call their building departments and just, ask them if they received the documentation through the portal and what the process is if they did not.
Yeah, okay.
Yep.
All right. And we're going to have, the end is going to be all Q&A, but yeah, got one more here.
The private appraisal doesn't affect my taxes on my house? No.
So another thing we ran into through this process, we're all learning together as we navigate this post-storm environment. And one of the things we started having were people that had their properties held in a trust needed to pull a permit, and they were trying to pull an owner builder permit to do some minor work, and the building departments would tell them, well, no, a trust is the same as a corporation. You have to either hire a contractor, licensed contractor, or you have to take it out of the trust. And once I found out about that, I said, whoa, time out. We do not want to be advising people to remove their properties out of trust. So I said, there's got to be a better way. So our exemptions director and in-house counsel, Alex Luca, who's sitting back there answering questions right now online, we brainstormed on this and came up with a way, because we're already approving homestead exemptions. So we already request certain pieces of trust documents for review to validate that ownership and that depth of ownership and make sure that they are the rightful owners to be able to do something like pull a permit. So we took that burden off the building officials, because I understand them not wanting to have to go down that road and try and vet whether that person that's trying to get this permit is really a beneficiary of that trust or affiliated with that trust. So we put a new process in place right on our website. Either a building official or that owner can go on and request direct from our office a ownership verification letter that will prove that, so that they can take that to their respective building department and be able to move forward and not have to delve into messing with their trust, which they shouldn't be doing. So just want to let you know that process is out there. Another thing, so people that were damaged in the storms, if they do want to get up off the ground, whether they want to voluntarily elevate their existing home, whether they want to abandon the lower portion and build on top, whether they want to knock it all down and start over again and build a new elevated compliant home, you can do all of that under the calamity provision and not upset your assessed value cap where you're sitting today. So up to 110% of your living square footage. So we've made a policy shift within our office in delving into statutes a little deeper and talking with some of our other affected colleagues, because when we really look at the statutory language of when the calamity provision was passed, most of the storms that were affecting properties were from wind damage, wasn't necessarily flood damage. We don't feel that the 110% appropriately deals with the flood properties because of the high dollars that you have to expend to get off the ground. You know, you can easily have $300,000 or $400,000 just in your elevation portion of your home. So the portion that is below base flood elevation, as long as it's only, you know, garage, storage, or entry, would not be part of any taxable consideration over the 110% calculation. No, you're not allowed to put laundry down there. But that's a floodplain issue. You can't have plumbing down there, correct?
That's correct.
Right. Yeah.
What if your washer and dryer were already in your existing garage?
Well, but the question was, what if your washer and dryer are already in your existing garage? But that was old code.
But when you raise the house, it's no longer a garage.
That's what I'm going to park it in your house.
Not the new code, no.
No. No electrical, no plumbing, no living space on the enclosure below the elevated area. Everything is off the ground. You can have some plugs just because you have to have, you know, emergency, and they'll be the GFIs separately grounded, but not, you're not going to have dryer hookups and things like that. No, we can't have electrical below the base flood elevation plus whatever freeboard that city has.
Is that considered part of the square footage? Like on the, like say you have 1,700 square feet and you have the garage. Now you're going to build on top of it.
Right.
And now that be a big room. That's too. So that 10%.
The 110 would be based on the living square footage. So if you're going to finish out the garage and make that additional living area, whatever portion goes over the 110 would go on over the cap, so to speak. That's what we call it, over your assessed value cap. But you're going to have the potential to have a much larger garage underneath that is not going to be added on. That's outside the 110.
Right, but what I'm saying is like,
You have an 800 garage. That square foot, your different percent.
no, I'm talking about
Abandoned.
and I'm building on top of it. But now my garage is down there.
Right.
And that would be probably over the 110, because I'm probably.
A little bit. It's going to take you over a little.
So what's the
What happens?
You would just have to pay the delta on the tax. You'd be assessed for the portion of over 110%. So if you're at 1,700 square feet, you would do your 110% calculation, and then anything in excess of that's living area would go on as new space.
The difference between the square footage less or is going to have some relationship impact fees.
Oh, well, impact fees, that's a whole different animal on new construction.
Let's say I'm building the addition is being 1,700 square feet in a 1,500 square feet. Do I have to pay the impact fee for those 200?
That's going to be up to the jurisdiction that you're in and how their impact fee structure works.
Yeah, I mean,
it's a little bit different there.
For budgeting purposes.
Right. Yeah. Because it's a different type of space, you know. Garage isn't, you know, all space is not created equal. The sub area space of a garage is not the same as living area. You know, it's a different level of finish, obviously. Let me finish up here, and then we're going to just close out with all Q&A on whatever you guys want to throw out. Another thing, if you have a home that is under 1,500 square feet, so you say you had an 800 square foot house, the calamity provision allows you to build up to 1,500 square feet. So that's more than 110%, and still keep your cap in place. So that's important to know. So it's basically, think of it this way, it's 1,500 square feet or 110%, whichever is greater. Let's see, what else we want to touch on? So that's moving us into, we're going to talk about, there are a few hurricane home repair programs out there. There's some grant programs. There's one offered by unincorporated that also covers all of the cities except for Clearwater, St. Pete, and Largo, because they have their own programs. We've got the information on here where you can get to those links. I'll bring Lisa back up. She can touch on this, plus the new Elevate Florida program that is being run by the state, which is a new twist on how grant programs are going to function, which will be a little more friendly than the old, you spend all the money and then we'll reimburse you maybe in 30 years, you know. But, yeah. Once you're gone, you know, your kids may be the beneficiary. So I'm joking, obviously, with that. But so that program. But do you want to enlighten them anything on these home repair programs?
The home repair programs are going through our community development group, and they're based on income level and value of your building, as far as I know. I don't know a ton about them, but there's a lot of information on our website about them. If you go to the storm response page that emergency management has. The Elevate Florida program, I know a little bit about them.
I'll show that in a second. So
Okay.
let me touch on the county, I just want to put this out there because two of the qualifying criteria for the up to $30,000 Pinellas County program are your adjusted median income can't exceed 120%, and your assessed value cannot exceed 375. So our office had nothing to do with that, but they're grabbing our value there. Now keep in mind, that's assessed value. They really, in my mind, shouldn't have used assessed value. It should have been just value, which is really your market value, and they should have set a higher threshold. Because your assessed value is really where your Save Our Homes is capped. So if you've been in your home for a really long time, you very likely have a very low assessed value, and you may qualify for this program. So look at that number very carefully. So when you go to our website and look at that, you'll see we've got 3 different values. You've got just value, assessed value, and taxable value. And you want to look at that assessed value column and see if you're underneath that. So I just wanted to point that out because words matter there, and you need to make sure you pick the right one. I really don't know much about the Clearwater, St. Pete, and Largo programs other than I know that the funding is less than the county program. I believe the Clearwater one is up to 20,000. St. Pete is up to 10. I do not know what the threshold is on the cap is on Largo, but we do have the links there on the slides so people can go in and check those out if they live in those specific jurisdictions. Let's move on to the Elevate Florida program. This is the one Lisa knows a little bit more about, and I've just been getting educated up on it. So tell them what you know.
Okay, so this is an iteration of the FMA, which is the Flood Mitigation Assistance Program. Now, the traditional version of this program requires that the homeowner come up with the funds, pay for the project, submit for reimbursement, and it would be reimbursement to whichever jurisdiction they reside in, and then that jurisdiction would have to, in turn, do the reimbursement, submit to the state for reimbursement. It's a very long process. So our amazing staff at FDEM have come up with this new program, and this is part of what FEMA puts out called Swift Current. So it's the FMA, the Swift Current version of it. And that comes out not annually for a national base. It comes out after a storm specifically for the area impacted from that storm. So it's going to be a smaller pool of applicants. And FEMA's been doing this now for a couple of years, I believe, but the state picked this up and said, you know what, we're going to implement this. We're going to take the communities out. So now the communities don't need to be that middleman anymore. So you'll be applying directly to the state. The state is also going to cover the upfront funding for the projects, with the exception of whatever the match is. For severe repetitive loss, there's a 0% match. For a repetitive loss, there is a 10% match. The program covers 90%. And if you're not any kind of repetitive loss, then it's a 25% match. So you would have to come up with whatever your match is. For the elevation, for jacking your house up, if that's what the project is, from my understanding, there's not a cap on it. The project will be covered with the exception of all the components of that project that are covered will be covered with the exception of the match. If it's a demo reconstruct, because the foundation just isn't structurally sound enough to elevate it, and you do a demo reconstruction, in that case, there is a cap on it. I believe it's 220. So just things to consider. The elevate the existing building and then using your insurance funds to do the repairs on the inside now that it's elevated is probably ideal for not spending much money out of your own pocket on the program.
Can you say what the individual's contribution is again for each of those pieces?
If you are not a repetitive loss property, it's 25%. If you are a repetitive loss property, it would be 10%. And if you're severe repetitive loss, it's 0. And that's the program covers 75%, 90%, or 100%. And that's where you get the match.
Right. So it's a 0 to 25% out of pocket for the homeowner.
Correct. And then, there may be other expenses that aren't covered by the grant, but the grant does cover most of what the project will encompass.
That's really, really good.
It's a really great opportunity.
That's the best that they've ever put out there. And they've straight piped it and taken that before you had to make like as she alluded to, you had to apply for these grants through your jurisdiction, which was a huge bottleneck because they didn't have the staff and the resources to administer those grants and then shoot them to the state. So that was huge to be able to take it right to the state.
And for folks that have these substantial damage letters, I have heard that the state will be ranking, the priority projects, the ones that are going to get approved first, will be those severe severe repetitive loss properties that are also substantially damaged would rank the highest. So they are looking at whether or not you were substantially damaged when they evaluate your application. They're also looking at whether you're a repetitive loss or severe repetitive loss for when they rank the projects.
For repetitive loss, it would have had to have been reported before, not my property flooded and I fixed it and I didn't claim anything.
That would be a question for the state. And like I said, I've just heard through the grapevine that that's how they're going to be, ranking these projects, but I can't speak for sure to, exactly how they're going to process those. So I would contact the state. The Elevate Florida program has a website, which Mike's got a screenshot of one of the flyers from that site on there. You want to, if you're interested in that program, you do want to send them an email, tell them your story. If you have a rep loss letter, maybe give them a copy of it. A substantial damage letter, send them a copy of it. Just any information you can provide them now so that they have you sort of in queue, they know you're interested. That would be my recommendation to get in there. You can also sign up for alerts on their website so that when they have an update, like their application portal opens, for example, you would get an alert that happens.
What's the turnaround time?
So they're trying to speed it up. The traditional one takes years. It's very slow, which is, another deterrent with that program. This one, they're trying to speed up. We don't have a timeline from them, but we do anticipate them getting the application portal open probably February-ish. I can't speak on behalf of FDEM. These are just, what I'm hearing at meetings and things like that. So it's going to be an amazing opportunity.
And we talked off to the side a little bit. It sounded like there were going to be approved contractors and architects that are working that the state will contract with, because I believe it's going to be direct pay to those professionals.
As I understand it, that's how they're setting it up right now. But more to come from FDEM. So this is going to be one of those stay tuned because we don't have a lot of information on it right now.
Well, there is a question that is online, and it says, if we apply and are approved for the Elevate Florida grant, are we still eligible for the FEMA ICC?
Yeah, they're separate and apart from each other. There can be no duplication of benefits, however. So FEMA will have to work that out. I'm not sure how they'll divvy that up. You can't have duplication of benefits, but you're not going to be disqualified from one or the other.
And ICC, it means increased cost of compliance. So that's if you received a substantially damaged letter, you had a FEMA NFIP policy, you can apply for that additional $30,000, but you still cannot exceed the maximum of the $250,000. So if you are already received a $250,000 payout, you can't get $30,000 on top. That's all in within the $250,000.
I also want to mention, you do have to be an NFIP policy holder to
Yes.
qualify for the grant or to qualify for the ICC. So at the time that the notice of funding for that grant program came out, if you had an NFIP policy in force, that would make you eligible for the application. If you did not, you would not be eligible.
And that's the same with Elevate Florida?
That's the Elevate Florida, correct?
So
and
you
the
can't have
ICC.
private,
No, it has to be NFIP. However, once you came in and you got individual assistance, they probably signed you up for a 3-year NFIP policy. So when the next notice of funding, because I think this first pot of money came from Debby. So if when the notice of funding for Debby came out, you had a policy, then you would be eligible. If you did not have a policy, but you got one before the next notice of funding comes out from one of the next storms, which adds money into this program, then you would qualify for the next round, I guess, of
so
applications.
you could actually get insurance after you were damaged?
Yes.
Interesting.
And that's a requirement. So the individual assistance, when they provide that to you, one of the qualifiers is you have to maintain a flood insurance policy if you take this assistance from FEMA. So in most
Right.
cases, from what I understand, they sign folks up for a 3-year group policy.
Right, because that's one of the rules. If you agree to all that funding, then you need to ride with them for the long haul.
Right.
I have a question
Go ahead.
So for the Elevate Florida, I know you can lift your house.
Mhm.
Can you put a second story on it? Did they give you a grant for that?
So it depends on the flood zone, I believe. I don't know the specifics about what construction criteria they're going by. Theoretically, if you were going to elevate a house per building code and floodplain ordinances, you would be allowed to put a second story. Of course, you're going to have to do some engineering to the foundation and vacate the bottom. It would be allowed under building code and depending on flood zone, of course. You can't do that in a V zone or a coastal A zone. But if you were allowed to do that by building code, I don't know if they would allow that.
On the beach in AA, and basically St. Pete Beach has just approved that you can put a second story on.
Okay, so they reviewed the floodplain and all the information. I don't know if the grant will cover that type of construction or if it's strictly elevate the whole building or build a new building.
Well, the funding, isn't it just for the it's just for the elevation portion,
So
right?
the funding is for either elevating the existing building, or if you can't elevate it because of the
They
foundation,
also consider elevate putting a second story on too. So
you
it
have to
depends.
send the FDEM to ask them that question.
How would I find out about that?
Contact FDEM.
Okay, and you can give me their contact afterwards? Okay, thank you.
Got lots of hands. All right, let's do this. Let's finish. We only have a slide or two to close out. We're over our hour, but then we want to stay on and answer any questions that we can for everybody. I want to remind people, so there is a new addition to Homestead Exemption that is kicking in for 2025. It's not a giant amount, but your second band of $25,000 of Homestead Exemption will now start to move with the Consumer Price Index. It's always been at a flat rate. It's been 2 bands of 25 for a maximum of $50,000. Now that second band of 25 is allowed to grow. So it will not go down, but it can grow cumulatively over time. So for example, the new CPI just came out through the year end of 2024. It was 2.9%, which is just a little bit under the 3% homestead cap. But that doesn't matter. Whatever that inflationary number is each year will be what the $25,000 homestead exemption will grow by. So in this case, it's going to be $722. They do some funky rounding there because when I do the math, it's $725. But I don't understand DOR math apparently. So I need to. I'm assuming it's extra decimal places on the CPI, and then they round it up for your viewing pleasure. But it's actually 2.899999, something like that. So I just wanted to make sure you guys were aware of that. That second band of 25,000 applies to all your millages except for schools. Oh, there's the other one. And just want to remind you a couple of ways to follow us. We've got our social media, includes our Facebook page. We're always putting out timely information there. We have 3 different flavors of newsletters, one for homeowners, one for business owners, and one for real estate professionals. So anybody in the real estate realm, whether they're attorneys, agents, insurance, lenders. Encourage them to subscribe to that one so they can best communicate with their clients and keep them in the know based on the tax roll calendar and important events that, you know, we don't like to have to do, like this type of stuff, and deal with and let their clients know about them. So encourage you to follow there. All our prior sessions that we do with public ed, we put on our YouTube channel, plus additional helpful information, website, navigation tips, all those types of things. So encourage you to check that out as well. Our next session will be February 6th, and that is going to focus on exemptions. That'll be right here again. We'll do it both in person and hybrid, and we will have our exemptions team presenting to you on that one. So if you have any questions related to anything in the exemption realm, they are the experts, and they will answer all those questions for you. And our last slide here before we go into finish up our Q&A. This is a service from the clerk's office. As you probably have read and heard, property fraud alert is a growing concern. The clerk has had a free tool out there that you can use. You can register for called Property Fraud Alert. You go to propertyfraudalert.com and select the Pinellas County there, and you can quickly register. You put your name in, you give them an email address or a phone number, however you want to be contacted. What's nice about it is anytime anything gets recorded in public records, you get a notification if it matches your name or something close to it. So if you had somebody trying to put a false deed in, you could get notice far sooner and be able to respond to it and get with law enforcement.
That's forever, right? It's not something you have to sign up.
One time.
Okay.
Yep. I did it years ago, and it's great because even you get a notice of commencement for construction. It's good to know that your contractors are doing the right thing. You get a satisfaction of mortgage. You know, different things will pop up throughout your life once you're signed up on that you'll forget about, and you'll be like, why did I get this? And it'll give you the link. You open the OR booking page, and you read the document. And you say, oh yeah, that is me. Now, if your name's John Smith, you might get a few more communications than somebody else might, but I highly encourage people to take advantage of that. There are pay services out there that do similar types of things. Now, there's no financial guarantees on this. This is just a notification service. And with that, we're into Q&A, but I really appreciate everybody coming out and joining us online. I know we had over, I think, 350 plus sign up online. So we want to try and share and get information out there, and we encourage you to call our office. Anything within the property valuation or exemption realm, we're happy to answer those questions. And I know we're all trying to navigate through this minefield together, and it's not the easiest. So we want to try and be here to help. So with that, let's roll into some more questions. We need to we'll start here where the microphone is.
So I saved my questions. You talked about the elevation program that you have. So this is now the second year I had to reapply for the FEMA grant to elevate, and I think it's separate than what you're talking about. But however, prior to that, I did everything was approved. I guess the person for those grants moved positions, so every one of us that applied had to apply again last year. And so now does that make us a priority for getting?
That's really probably outside both of our expertise. And I see that challenge there, and I could see that the ball could certainly get dropped, but the person that left was probably at the jurisdictional level, and that was part of that pinch point as you're having to go through your city to then communicate with the state, and hopefully that blockade has been moved, but you may have to talk with somebody at the city and make sure that your application information is all, that reconnection occurs with the state.
I continuously email Hannah because she's the
St. Pete. Yeah.
This is now the third year. We're still waiting for grants. So do I just forget about that grant money and now apply for this new one to get my home elevated, because that is already 3 years in the making?
Yeah,
So they're,
Ask Hannah.
yeah, ask Hannah, but they are like 3 years behind on these grants. I mean, they're just now starting to process, I think, the applications from 3 years ago. So it's, I mean, it's a really long process with the FMA program. This is supposed to be an expedited version of it, and it sounds like it's going to be. Talk to Hannah, but I would probably recommend that you would apply for the new program.
Yeah, it sounds like it's going to be a new application.
New application.
And all of the funds that you talked about, different counties have different amounts to give you. How do you qualify for those funds? You had like 10,000, 30,000. St. Pete was at 10,000.
Each one of them has what qualifies for reimbursement. So you have to show them your receipts, and then they'll reimburse you as long as they're qualified items, like roof repair or, you know, whatever it was.
Whatever your insurance doesn't cover, then that qualifies, or is that in addition, or what?
Whatever came out of the homeowner's pocket up to that amount that qualifies.
Thank you.
FEMA impose a time requirement on resolution? Like I was told by our building official that you have to have your repairs completed or have them well underway by the start of hurricane season, which we all know is June 1. This process of moving at a snail's pace. Elevate Florida isn't even taking applications yet. So how long, you know, what is the timeline to decide how you're going to move forward?
So are you talking mitigating because you're substantially damaged, or are you talking just fixing something?
Let's just say
if you're
substantially damaged. Like to wait to see if you can get assistance
So
through
I can speak to the unincorporated county only. So for unincorporated, our folks that are substantially damaged, we will be allowing minor repairs so they can kind of camp out in their home while they decide what they're going to do. As long as they show us, the deadline would be for June 1st because we want folks to be mitigated before the next hurricane season. Obviously, we want them to be safe. So when we get to that point, though, and say you're in the application process for Elevate Florida, you're going to provide that information to us to show that you are working on your mitigation plan, and then we will give you an extension on that. It's temporary residency that we're doing. So it will be, as long as you're showing progress, you have a contract with a contractor or an architect to work on the plans. That shows us progress. So as long as you are making progress towards your mitigation project, then we'll be able to give you an extension on that temporary residency is what we're calling it.
So FEMA mandate municipality kind of has their own guidelines that we're seeing so much of in.
So when it comes down to do an audit, what they're going to want to see is that we have been following up on every single substantially damaged property, and that every single one of them has a plan or is working on their plan. We have to show them that it's not just sitting there and they're living in it and they fixed it without permits. That's when the community gets in trouble. So we need to just make sure that we're working with every single substantially damaged property owner so that they have a mitigation plan in place, and we'll check with them frequently to make sure that it's progressing. And if we don't do that, that's when the audit, you know, could go south, right? So FEMA wants to see progress is what they want to see.
Is there a timeline? Notify?
As far as I know, there is not a hard timeline. There is a timeline on the ICC though. So when you get your substantial damage determination letter, make sure you file for that ICC claim within 60 days.
From the date of our...
From the date of the substantial damage letter, correct.
But there's no time to get your substantial damage.
To get your substantial damage. Are you talking about the initial assessment?
I don't have.
So the initial is ongoing. If you have your costs of repairs and you're ready to apply for your permit and you're in unincorporated, you apply for that permit. And if you were deemed as one of the buildings that needed to have a substantial damage assessment because, you know, you had water over your outlets, then that's going to get bumped into like a different bucket of reviews, which is the detailed substantial damage assessment. Once it clears that, then it goes back over to permitting to go through its substantial improvement review, et cetera. So the initial suite of letters that we're doing on those buildings that were identified as needing an inspection, they're in progress. Like I said, countywide, I think there were 30,000 buildings flagged. Unincorporated had over 5,000 inspections done. So we're still working through the assessments and the letters. It's just an enormous amount of data and a huge task. So folks that are ready to move on, they need to get their permit application in, and then we'll do the detailed assessment.
So stop that process. However, they are not.
They may not. they may not have the manpower to do it. So, you know, I can give them a call and, you know, talk to them and, yeah, I can give them a call. Because, you know, it may be as simple as they need to put in a mission request with the state to get some more staff, right, to help them go through these reviews. And it could be that they already did that, but the state hasn't been able to fill the order, so to speak. So, you know, think about how widespread this flooding was. There's only so many staff. We have a lot of folks that are doing reviews that are out of state. You know, they're working remotely out of state because we just don't have the manpower in state to be able to fill these roles that need to be filled for the amount of damage that occurred. So it could be that Gulfport already did put in a mission request, but it just hasn't been filled yet because the state hasn't been able to find the qualified people to fill those roles. So it could be a number of things. I'll give them a call. I would expect that they've probably put in a mission request, so. So we meet with all the cities once a week. So I will bring this meeting up right here when we meet next week and just kind of gauge where they're at and see what kind of support they need. And then maybe we can, you know, pull the state in and see if they can speed up any of these mission requests. Maybe we can share some resources, but I will work with them when we meet next week. Okay. Understood.
Hi. So I've already had an estimate on lifting the home and want to move forward. When you say that there's going to be certain contractors that are allowed to do this, and we won't know that for a little while, do you recommend waiting just a little bit? And even, you know, like I'm just about ready to put the deposit down, right?
That's a good question. So with the grant, you can't start the work before you apply for the grant and it all gets approved, right? So if you're going down the path of the grant, it's on their timeline. So no, you can't just sign up with your own contractor and start demoing and things right now. It's not a reimbursement grant like you do the work and get reimbursed. This is you apply if the benefit cost analysis meets the criteria that they need and it gets approved, and then you select, however they're setting it up, select from the pool or they assign you a person, whatever it is, then you move forward with it. But if you're just going out and you found yourself a contractor, an architect, and you're going to do the work, you can't do it and then get reimbursed with the program. So you kind of have to pick a path. Do you want to go down this path that might take a little bit of time, or do you want to use the SBA loan as a good example? SBA, they extended the application period. You can get low interest loans through SBA, and you just want to take that loan and do the project yourself, then you go do it.
And is that to the Elevate Florida grant and the ICC grant?
So the ICC is not a grant. That's part of your insurance policy. Okay. So the increased cost of compliance is up to an additional $30,000 on your NFIP policy. So once you get your substantial damage letter, you supply that to your insurance agent. Your insurance agent will probably ask for additional information because we couldn't put everything in the letter that they needed. So you'll have to email the community. I just wrote a letter 2 days ago to one of our residents who is substantially damaged applying for ICC. They're going to need to know your finished floor elevation. They're going to need to know your lowest adjacent grade, what your flood hazard information is, like flood elevation, flood zone. There was a whole series of questions that we had to put the information together for this resident to apply for that. So whichever jurisdiction you're in, you'll need to ask them for that information. But the insurance agent should be the person that tells you, hey, you need to add this information to that. But the ICC is not a grant. So the ICC, I would talk to your insurance agent about when you can do what as far as timeline.
If you force me to raise my house, my wife has a disability and she cannot climb stairs constantly. So we would have to put an elevator in. Is that going to be on me to pay for that cost then?
So you are substantially damaged, so you're required to mitigate the structure and bring it into compliance. So whatever features you would need in that home would be your responsibility to put in that home, yes.
Even though she is failed, not where she had to climb 14 steps. She was unaware of it, and she did this, and then she went to the doctor and said, "What were you doing?" She said, "You cannot do that."
I'm sorry.
So you're because you're me. We're at several feet ground level. Our house is somewhat raised a little bit. So you're forcing me to pay for more things that I don't need. That's where I'm at now.
So I'm not forcing you to do anything, but the program. I don't work for FEMA. I work for Pinellas County, but I understand your frustration, and I have a handicapped father. I am very in tune with what you're saying right now, and there are things like ramps and elevators and lifts, and they do all have a cost associated with them. But that's what FEMA will say. FEMA will say, well, the requirement doesn't have exemptions for ADA compliance. They don't. There are no exemptions.
I wouldn't be surprised if Elevate Florida that would be a covered cost, because that's part of your access into the property.
Yeah. Under the grant program, they may include that in the costs. I don't know. That would be, if you're applying for the grant, that would be an FDEM question to ask what's included.
Where did FEMA get all the rules that they're making on us? There's never, my knowledge, there's never been any legislation through Congress on this. My understanding is they make a rules, here, this is what you people have to follow. So who's given them the power to make all these regulations to force onto us?
The NFIP actually was an act of Congress back in 1968. It originally was under HUD, and eventually got transferred over to FEMA to manage the program. But this is in the CFR. This is federal legislation. And if a community chooses to participate in this program, for the immense benefits that come with the program, they need to remain compliant with the program. And this is the way the program has been outlined. It is to protect people and to protect property. So the intent is to get folks out of harm's way. And the criteria that are in the CFR and then in the interpreted documentation from FEMA, it all complies with that. It's all about trying to protect people. That's what this is. And providing that insurance to folks as well. It's very difficult to get a private policy in Florida in a very high risk area for an affordable rate. So it's very important that the NFIP is there to provide these policies to people, because most folks have a mortgage. The official term is, if you have a federally backed mortgage, you must carry a flood insurance policy. But to be frank, most mortgage companies will require you to carry flood insurance. I've had residents come in and get letter of map revision because their finished floor is higher than the base flood elevation, and their mortgage company won't recognize it. Their mortgage company says, no, we think you're still at risk for flooding. You still need to carry flood insurance. And that's on the mortgage company to decide. So it's, the CFR has the NFIP program outline in it, and then FEMA is the organization that has been tasked with implementing that program. And communities that choose to participate need to follow the program.
And what is the CFR?
Code of Federal Regulations. Sorry. I speak in acronyms, I apologize.
It's like she's in the military.
But what happens if a community elects not to participate?
There are very significant impacts. So there are certain disaster assistance funds, I can't speak, I'm sorry, disaster assistance funds that will not be available. So when you think about after the storm and all the funding that we get from the federal government to help us with all the cleanup and all the individual assistance and all of that, there are certain pieces of that disaster assistance that are not given to communities that don't participate in the NFIP. The other piece of it is grants. So we have a lot more grants than this Elevate Florida or the FMA program, right? There are a lot more grants. There's the HMGP, which is the Hazard Mitigation Assistance Program. And we have a local mitigation strategy that identifies bigger flood mitigation type projects. So Public Works has a capital improvements program under which we do big flood mitigation projects where we improve, stormwater infrastructure, or we do land acquisition to create, more storage area for some of the stormwater, things like that. So that HMGP funding can be applied to these larger projects. And then there's Resilient Florida funding. If you have a vulnerability assessment and you participate in the CRS, which is the community rating system, which is where you get your insurance discount through the NFIP. So if you do those things, then you have a higher ranking to qualify for those grants. So if you don't participate at NFIP, you're not eligible for all these grants. So all this funding that we get from the government would go away. And then on top of that, the insurance implications that I talked about. We've got an unincorporated like 19,000 policies in force with almost $8 billion in coverage. Can you imagine if nobody had flood insurance coverage here? How long would the recovery time take? People don't have any insurance money to even help them get back on their feet. It would be very, very difficult.
So to qualify for the Elevate Florida grant, if you've had a loss, but you're not substantially damaged, do you qualify or do you have to be substantially damaged?
You have to be substantially damaged. From what I heard, and this is unofficial, from what I heard, being substantially damaged may rank you higher in getting approved.
All right, we're going to have to shut it down here in a few. I know we've gone an hour and 40. Go ahead.
I have a question on the differences. What's the benefits and not benefits between being substantially damaged and not substantially damaged? Is there more if you're substantially damaged?
So there's a clause, if you have an NFIP policy, if you are substantially damaged, you can file for your ICC claim, which is increased cost of compliance, and it's up to an additional $30,000 for certain things that will help bring you into compliance.
But if you're only getting $250,000 to
repair on that,
right? And because my home was not substantially damaged, but my insurance is paying the whole policy because it is definitely substantially lost. And whenever I spoke with the city of Reddington Shores, she said, when you do the scope of work and we see it's over that 125, then we're changing it to, so they'll automatically do that, right?
Correct. So let me reiterate what I said earlier. This first big broad brush of inspections and estimates, right? They're substantial damage estimates. So we're using a FEMA tool. And I want to give a huge shout out to our property appraiser and all of his staff. They've done an incredible job helping us with this program because we needed all these values and we needed to adjust the depth damage curves to what the reality of how things were built down here are. And they have worked overnight on weekends to help us get through this process. So huge shout out to Mike and his team.
You got a great team. Thank you.
Huge.
And I want to thank Lisa for being here. She's such a wealth of knowledge. That's why I wanted to try and pull her in for this discussion today. I knew it was going to throw us way over, but it's very important info to get out and to get her in front of people instead and out from dealing with state contractors and building officials and all that. So I like to get her out in public more.
Okay, let me finish that thought. So
Sure.
The big broad brush, right? We're using data from the property appraiser's office, data from the inspections with these depth damage curves. It is an estimate, right? So that first broad brush is an estimate. That data is going to be used to make sure we have permits from everybody. And we're not going to be able to do that. Folks are doing work without permits, obviously. Right? I've heard through the grapevine anyhow. So those folks, we're going to have to go and get a permit filed for them. But first we want to get through this initial brush of who is substantially damaged, who is not, based on the estimate. If you disagree, or when you come in for a permit and that letter was inaccurate, that's when it'll get picked up, because every permit for any kind of development in the floodplain is going through a substantial improvement review. So if the letter was incorrect in your case, said you were not substantially damaged, for instance, when you bring in that cost estimate of repairs, the permit tech that's reviewing that is going to see that the cost of repairs exceeded, send it to the floodplain manager and building official. They will change your determination to substantially damaged. So it just depends on what city you're in. But if you go over that threshold with your cost estimate, then you are substantially damaged. So you'll want to contact their building department, and in your case, you're planning on elevating anyhow, correct?
Well, I want, he's going to be doing like the first floor as my garage and building on top of it.
Okay, so that's mitigation, right? Because now you're going to be elevated above the minimum required flood elevation. You can't be in the coastal A zone or V zone, so you must be more towards Gulf Boulevard, I imagine.
No, I'm on the water.
You might want to check with the city on the flood zone before you move forward with that plan, because you have to be on columns and piles if you're in a coastal. Okay, so you'll have to have breakaway walls and things like that, so you may not be able to build on the original because of the building codes. So double check with the building department on the details of that. But as far as your letter goes, it doesn't sound like it's really impactful to you because you've already made a decision to go up.
The other word is easier if you are not substantial to build up than vice versa.
It shouldn't matter.
You're going to go through the appraisal,
I can talk to you after.
Yeah, all right. So what we're going to do, I want to talk to the people online here for a second. We're going to shut down the online, and we're going to stay here in the room, keep talking. It's one of the benefits. If you come in person, you get us for longer, and you get cookies. So next time, make sure you show up in person like all these good people. But I want to thank everybody that joined us online and in person. I know we've had probably a lot drop off just because this has run so long. But this will be on YouTube as well, so if people need to refer back to it. But I want to thank all the people online, and we'll shut this part down. But thank you again.